Every marriage has a breaking point. That invisible line where love and frustration collide and one person finally says the words that change everything. For Linda and Robert Coleman, that moment did not happen behind closed doors. It did not happen during a quiet argument in the kitchen after the kids were asleep. It happened on the stage of Family Feud, in front of a live studio audience, with Steve Harvey standing 3 feet away. And what Steve did next did not just save a game show round. It may have saved a marriage. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to this channel right now. Turn on that notification bell so you never miss stories like this one. We promise you, this is one you are going to want to hear all the way through. Now let us get into it. There was a time when people kept their problems private, when married couples smiled for the neighbors and saved the hard conversations for behind locked doors. But sometimes the truth does not wait for a convenient moment. Sometimes it forces its way out at the worst possible time, in the most public possible place. And sometimes, that is exactly what needs to happen. Because what happened between Linda and Robert Coleman on that Family Feud stage proved something that a lot of people forget. The hardest conversations are not the ones that end a marriage. They are the ones that save it. Robert Coleman was 52 years old, a long-haul truck driver from Memphis, Tennessee. He was a quiet, solid man built like a brick wall, with calloused hands and a voice that sounded like gravel rolling downhill. He had been driving trucks since he was 22 years old, right out of the Army, and in those 30 years he had logged over 3 million miles on American highways. He knew every rest stop between Memphis and Portland. He could tell you where to get the best biscuits in Arkansas and which stretch of I-40 had the worst potholes. Driving was not just his job. It was his identity. It was the one thing Robert Coleman knew he was good at. Standing next to him on the Family Feud stage was his wife, Linda, 49 years old, a woman with sharp eyes, a quick wit, and a smile that could light up an entire room when she chose to use it. But today that smile was strained. Anyone who had been married long enough could see it. The kind of smile a woman wears when she is holding something back, when she is trying to be pleasant for the cameras while carrying a weight that nobody else can see. Linda worked as a home health aide in Memphis, spending her days driving from house to house caring for elderly patients who could no longer care for themselves. She bathed them, fed them, helped them take their medications, and sat with them when their own families could not be there. It was exhausting, underpaid, deeply meaningful work, and Linda had been doing it for 11 years. The Colemans had been married for 27 years. They had raised 3 children together, 2 daughters and a son, all of them now adults. Their oldest, Keisha, was 26 and worked as a dental hygienist. Their middle child, DeAndre, was 23 and had just finished trade school to become an electrician. Their youngest, Tiffany, was 20 and still in college studying nursing, following in her mother's footsteps. By every traditional measure, the Colemans had done what they set out to do. They had raised good kids, paid their mortgage on time, and kept their family together through 3 decades of hard work. But there was a cost that nobody talked about, a cost that had been building silently for years like pressure inside a sealed container. Robert's job kept him on the road for weeks at a time, sometimes a month or more. When the children were young, Linda had managed everything alone. Every school play, every doctor's appointment, every broken appliance, every late night fever, every parent-teacher conference. She had been both mother and father for stretches that felt endless. Robert sent money home and called when he could, but phone calls from a truck stop in Nebraska do not fix a leaking pipe or comfort a child who had a nightmare. Linda never complained. Not once in 27 years did she call Robert on the road and tell him she was struggling. She believed that complaining would be disrespectful to the sacrifice he was making. He was out there working in dangerous conditions, driving through ice storms and exhaustion, missing his family, all so they could have a life. How could she complain about loneliness when he was the one sleeping in a truck cab 1,000 miles from home? So she swallowed it. Year after year, she swallowed every frustration, every lonely night, every holiday spent explaining to the kids why Daddy could not be there this time. She swallowed it all until there was no room left inside her for even one more thing. The Family Feud appearance was Tiffany's idea. She had applied months ago as a surprise for her parents' upcoming 28th wedding anniversary. When the family got accepted, everyone was thrilled. Everyone except Linda, who smiled and said the right things, but felt a knot tightening in her stomach that she could not explain. Something about being on that stage, about being asked to perform happiness as a family, was pressing against a nerve she had been protecting for a very long time. The taping started like any other episode. The Coleman family, wearing matching purple shirts that Tiffany had ordered online, stood across from the Martinez family from San Antonio. Steve Harvey came out to his usual thunderous applause, cracking jokes and warming up the crowd. He shook hands with both families, complimented Linda's earrings, and asked Robert about life on the road. Robert gave a short, polite answer about loving the open highway. Linda stood beside him with her arms crossed, smiling but saying nothing. The first round went well enough. Keisha buzzed in with a great answer, and the Coleman family took the board. They worked through the answers with decent teamwork, laughing and encouraging each other. Steve was enjoying their energy, especially DeAndre, who had a goofy confidence that made the audience laugh every time he opened his mouth. For those first few minutes, the Colemans looked like exactly what they appeared to be on the surface. A strong, loving, successful black family from Memphis having the time of their lives on national television. But the cracks started showing in the second round. The question was simple enough. Steve read from his card with his usual dramatic flair. Name something a wife wishes her husband would do more often. The audience chuckled, anticipating the usual answers. Help around the house. Cook dinner. Say I love you. The Martinez family had already put up a few answers. Now it was the Colemans' turn to steal. Steve looked at Linda. Linda, this is your chance to steal. Name something a wife wishes her husband would do more often. Linda paused. She looked at the board. She looked at Steve. Then she looked at Robert, who was standing at the end of the family lineup, and something shifted in her expression. It was subtle, but the cameras caught it. A flicker of something real crossing her face. Pain. Exhaustion. 27 years of swallowed words rising to the surface. Be home, Linda said. Her voice was steady, but the two words carried a weight that made the audience go quiet for just a moment before the board confirmed it as an answer. The family cheered. They had stolen the round, but Linda did not celebrate. She just nodded and stepped back to her position with her arms crossed again. Steve noticed. He always noticed. The game continued through the third and fourth rounds, but the energy in the Coleman family had shifted. Robert was trying harder now, overcompensating with louder reactions and bigger smiles, the way people do when they sense that something is wrong, but do not want to address it publicly. Linda's answers were getting shorter. Her smile was getting thinner. Tiffany kept glancing between her parents with the worried eyes of a child who has spent her whole life reading the tension between the two people she loves most in the world. Then came the moment that no one saw coming. It happened during a break between rounds, while the production crew was resetting the board. The cameras were still rolling for behind the scenes footage, the kind that usually gets cut but sometimes captures something too powerful to leave on the editing room floor. Steve had walked over to the Coleman family to chat, something he often did during breaks to keep the families loose and comfortable. He was telling a story about his own wife when he turned to Robert and Linda and said casually, 27 years. That is incredible. What is the secret to staying together that long? Robert smiled and started to give the standard answer. Well, Steve, it is all about communication and respect and making sure you always put God first in your marriage. It was a fine answer, a safe answer, the kind of answer that sounds good on television and means almost nothing in real life. But before Robert could finish his sentence, Linda spoke. The secret, Linda said, and her voice had a sharpness to it that made everyone on stage and in the front rows of the audience turn their heads. The secret is that one person does all the holding and the other person does all the leaving. That is the secret, Steve. I have been holding this family together by myself for 27 years while this man drives across the country. I raised those 3 kids. I fixed the house. I buried my mother alone because he was on a delivery in Oregon and could not get back in time. I sat in emergency rooms by myself. I went to every single graduation, every game, every school event alone, and I have not said one word about it in 27 years. Not one word." The studio went completely silent. Robert's smile disappeared. Tiffany's hand flew to her mouth. Keisha and DeAndre stared at their mother like they were seeing her for the first time. The audience was frozen. This was not a game show moment. This was a marriage unraveling in real time under studio lights. Linda was not finished. Her voice was shaking now, but she could not stop. The dam had broken and 27 years of silence were pouring out of her like floodwater through a cracked wall. "I love you, Robert. I have always loved you. But I cannot take it anymore. I wake up in an empty house, and I go to sleep in an empty house, and I spend every day taking care of other people because at least they need me there. At least they notice when I show up. I have been so lonely for so long that I forgot what it felt like to not be lonely. And I am tired. I am so tired of pretending that I am fine when I am not fine. I have not been fine for years." Tears were streaming down her face now. She wiped them quickly with the back of her hand, embarrassed, looking around at the cameras like she had just realized where she was and what she had done. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "I should not have said all that. This is supposed to be fun." She tried to force a smile back onto her face, but it would not come. Robert stood completely still. His arms hung at his sides. His jaw was tight. He was not angry. He was destroyed. You could see it in his eyes. The look of a man who had just discovered that the life he thought he was providing for his family had come at a cost he never fully understood. Every mile he had driven, every paycheck he had sent home, every sacrifice he thought he was making for them, his wife had been paying a price for all of it that he never bothered to calculate. Steve Harvey stood between them. He had not moved. He had not cracked a joke. He had not tried to change the subject or move the show along. He had done the one thing that very few people on television ever do. He had listened. Really listened. And now he was going to do something about it. Steve took a slow breath, then turned to Linda first. He spoke to her not like a host speaks to a contestant, but like a brother speaks to a sister who has been carrying too much for too long. "Linda, I want you to hear me. What you just did took more courage than most people will ever have in their entire lives. You told the truth. In front of your family, in front of these cameras, in front of all these people, you said what you have been holding inside for 27 years. And I need you to know that there is nothing to apologize for. Not one thing." Linda was crying freely now, not even trying to wipe the tears anymore. Steve continued, "I know women like you, Linda. I was raised by a woman like you. Women who hold everything together and never ask for credit. Women who sacrifice their own happiness so that everyone else in the family can have theirs. And the world calls that strength, and it is strength. But it is also a trap. Because when you never speak up, the people who love you do not even know you are drowning. They think the water is fine because you keep smiling." Then Steve turned to Robert. The audience watched nervously, expecting Steve to scold him, to call him out, to point a finger at the man who had left his wife alone for nearly 3 decades. But Steve did not do that. Instead, he did something far more powerful. He walked over to Robert and stood directly in front of him, close enough that the microphones could barely pick up what he said next, because he spoke so softly. "Robert, I am not going to stand here and tell you that you are a bad husband. Because I do not believe that. A bad husband does not get up and drive a truck through ice and exhaustion to feed his family. A bad husband does not sacrifice his own comfort for 30 years so his children can go to college. You are not a bad man, Robert, but you made a mistake that a lot of good men make. You confused providing with being present. You thought that sending money home was the same thing as being home. And it is not. It is not even close." Robert's eyes were red. He was fighting to keep his composure, his big calloused hands clenched at his sides, his jaw working back and forth. He was not a man who cried easily. 3 decades of solitary highway driving had made him comfortable with silence and uncomfortable with emotion. But Steve's words were cutting through every defense he had built. Steve kept going, his voice steady and full of a hard-earned wisdom that only comes from making your own share of mistakes. "I have been married. I have been divorced. I have hurt people I loved because I was too busy chasing success to notice that the people who mattered most were standing right behind me, waiting for me to turn around. I know what it feels like to wake up one day and realize you have been winning at work and losing at home. And Robert, brother, your wife just told you something that most wives never say out loud. She told you the truth. That is a gift. A painful gift, but a gift all the same. Because now you know, and now you can do something about it. Steve turned back to face both of them and the audience. Here is what I have learned in my life. A marriage does not end because of one big explosion. It ends because of 1,000 small silences. It ends because two people stop talking about the things that matter and start pretending that everything is fine. Linda, you broke that silence today. And Robert, the question is not whether your wife still loves you. She just told you she does. The question is, what are you going to do with this moment right here, right now? For a long moment, Robert did not move. The entire studio held its breath. Then, slowly, like a man waking up from a very long sleep, Robert turned to face his wife. He crossed the stage in 3 heavy steps and he stopped right in front of her. His voice, when it finally came, was rough and broken and barely above a whisper. I did not know, he said. Linda, I swear to God, I did not know it was that bad. Every time I called you from the road, you said you were fine. You said the kids were fine. You said everything was fine. And I believed you because I needed to believe you. Because if I let myself think about what I was missing, I would not have been able to get back in that truck. And if I did not get back in that truck, we would not have had the house or the insurance or the money for Tiffany's college. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought providing was enough. He reached out and took both of Linda's hands in his. She looked up at him with 27 years of exhaustion written across her face. It was not enough, she whispered. I needed you here. I needed you at the table. I needed you in the bed next to me at night. The money was never what I needed, Robert. I needed my husband. Robert pulled her into his chest and wrapped his arms around her, and for the first time in as long as anyone could remember, Robert Coleman cried. Not quietly, not discreetly. He cried the way a man cries when he finally understands how much damage he has done without ever meaning to. Their 3 children rushed forward from the family area and wrapped their arms around both their parents, turning the moment into a family embrace that had the entire studio audience on their feet, crying and clapping and holding each other. Steve Harvey stepped back to give them space. He wiped his own eyes with the back of his hand and shook his head slowly. When the moment had settled enough for him to speak, he said something that became one of the most shared quotes from the show that entire season. Ladies and gentlemen, you are looking at the bravest woman I have ever met on this stage. Not because she said something hard, but because she said it with love. She did not want to leave. She wanted to be heard. And that right there is the difference between a marriage that ends and a marriage that gets a second chance. They still had a game to finish. Steve, with the kind of emotional intelligence that has made him one of the most trusted figures on television, gently guided the family back to the game. He cracked a small joke, just enough to release the tension without dismissing what had just happened. All right, y'all got me crying on my own show. My makeup people are going to be furious. Let us play some Family Feud. The audience laughed through their tears, and somehow, impossibly, the Colemans pulled it together enough to finish the game. They won. They made it to fast money. Linda and Tiffany played the final round together. Tiffany went first and scored 134 points. When Linda stepped up to the podium, Steve gave her a nod that said more than words could. She took a deep breath, answered all 5 questions, and brought their total to 217 points. The 20,000 was theirs. The family erupted in celebration, and this time, every hug was different. Every embrace carried more meaning than it would have an hour ago. They were not just celebrating prize money. They were celebrating something far more valuable, a family that had chosen honesty over silence. But Steve was not done. Before the cameras shut off, he pulled Robert aside in full view of the audience. Robert, I want you to make me a promise, man to man, right here on this stage. I want you to promise me that you are going to go home and have a real conversation with your wife. Not a 5-minute check-in from a truck stop. A real conversation. And I want you to think seriously about what your life looks like going forward. Because your kids are grown now, the job is done, the sacrifices were made. Now it is time to be present for the woman who held it all together while you were gone." Robert nodded, and for the first time all day, his voice was clear and firm. "I hear you, Steve. I hear her. And I am going to make this right." Steve shook his hand, then pulled him into a hug. "I believe you, brother. Now go prove it." When the episode aired 5 weeks later, the response was unlike anything the Family Feud production team had seen in years. The clip of Linda's emotional confession went viral overnight. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed over 15 million times across social media platforms. News outlets and morning shows covered the story, but what resonated most was not the drama of the moment itself. It was the honesty. It was the rawness. Thousands of comments poured in from women who said they felt seen for the first time. Military wives, wives of first responders, wives of traveling salesmen and offshore workers, and anyone whose partner's career kept them away from home. They wrote things like, "Linda said what I have been feeling for 20 years. And I cried watching this because that is my life." The clip became more than a viral moment. It became a mirror that reflected a struggle millions of families live with every single day but rarely talk about. Men responded too. Truck drivers, long-haul workers, and men who traveled for a living wrote in to say that the episode had hit them like a punch to the chest. Several of them admitted that they had called their wives immediately after watching it. One comment that was shared hundreds of thousands of times said, "I have been on the road for 18 years and I just called my wife and asked her if she was okay. Really okay. She started crying. I am going home this weekend." That single comment received more engagement than any other post on the show's social media page that year. The Coleman story did not end when the cameras stopped rolling. 3 months after the episode aired, Robert made a decision that shocked everyone who knew him. After 30 years behind the wheel, he retired from long-haul trucking. He took a local delivery position with a distribution company in Memphis. The pay was less, significantly less, but the job kept him home every single night. He was there for dinner. He was there on weekends. He was there in the mornings when Linda left for work, and there in the evenings when she came home, exhausted from caring for her patients. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, the Colemans were actually living under the same roof as a daily reality, not just a once-a-month event. Linda later said in an interview with a local Memphis news station that the first few months of Robert being home full-time were not easy. You spend 27 years learning how to do everything yourself, and then suddenly the person you have been waiting for is standing in the kitchen asking where the spatula is, she said with a laugh that carried both humor and truth. "We had to learn how to be married again." Not the long-distance version. The real, everyday, in the same room version. It was harder than I expected, but it was also everything I had been praying for. They went to couples counseling, something Robert had initially resisted but eventually embraced after Steve Harvey personally recommended a therapist he trusted. In those sessions, they unpacked 27 years of assumptions, unspoken resentments, and love that had never found the right words. Robert learned that providing and being present were 2 different things, and that his wife had needed both. Linda learned that her silence, while well-intentioned, had robbed Robert of the chance to make different choices years earlier. They grew closer than they had ever been, not by pretending the past did not hurt, but by finally talking about it honestly. Steve Harvey invited them back for a follow-up segment 6 months later. When Robert and Linda walked back onto the Family Feud stage, the transformation was visible from the first step. Robert had his arm around Linda's waist. Linda was laughing, a real laugh, not the polite, camera-ready version from their first appearance. Their children stood behind them beaming. When Steve asked how things were going, Linda answered first. "He is home, Steve. Every night, every morning. He is home. And that is all I ever wanted." Robert added something that made Steve shake his head and smile. "I spent 30 years seeing this whole country from the window of a truck. Every mountain, every sunset, every city skyline. And it turns out the best view in America was always back home in my living room, sitting next to this woman." The audience erupted in applause. Steve pointed at Robert and said, No, that is a man who finally gets it. The follow-up segment also revealed that Linda had started a blog and an online support group for wives of long-distance workers. What had started as a simple Facebook page had grown into a community of over 40,000 women who shared their experiences, supported each other, and reminded each other that their feelings were valid. Linda posted regularly, always with the same message. You are not selfish for wanting your person to be present. You are not ungrateful for needing more than a paycheck. You deserve to be seen, heard, and held. If I can say it on national television after 27 years of silence, you can say it in your own living room. Robert became an unexpected advocate as well. He began speaking at trucking industry events about the toll that long-haul work takes on families. He did not sugarcoat his own story. He would stand in front of rooms full of drivers and say, I drove 3 million miles and almost lost the only person who made those miles worth driving. If you have a wife at home holding everything together, call her tonight. And do not just ask if she is fine. Ask her if she is happy. Those are two very different questions. Their daughter Tiffany, the one who had submitted the Family Feud application in the first place, graduated from nursing school the following spring. At her graduation dinner, she stood up and made a toast that left the entire table in tears. I applied to Family Feud because I wanted to give my parents a fun anniversary surprise. I had no idea I was giving them a second chance at their marriage. Mom, you taught me that love means showing up even when it is hard. Dad, you taught me that it is never too late to come home. I am so proud of both of you. Steve Harvey mentioned the Colemans in several interviews over the following year. He called Linda's moment on stage one of the most real things he had ever witnessed in his career. That woman was not performing, Steve said. She was not trying to go viral, she was just full. 27 years full, and she finally let it out. That kind of honesty is rare, and when it shows up, you better pay attention, because it can save lives. It saved theirs. Years later, the Colemans episode remained one of the most watched Family Feud clips online. It was shown in marriage workshops and relationship seminars across the country. It was referenced in sermons and therapy sessions. But for Linda and Robert, the legacy was much simpler. It was the sound of Robert's keys in the front door at 5:30 every evening. It was 2 cups of coffee on the kitchen table every morning. It was falling asleep in the same bed, in the same house, on the same street in Memphis, Tennessee, with 27 years of hard-won wisdom between them and the rest of their lives still ahead. If this story touched your heart, do us a favor right now. Hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this one. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it is okay to speak up, that it is never too late to ask for what you need, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do in a marriage is to finally say the words you have been holding inside. Drop a comment below and tell us your thoughts. We read every single one. Until next time, remember that the strongest marriages are not the ones that never have problems. They are the ones where 2 people are brave enough to face those problems out loud, together, even when it hurts.